Welcome back. The first time Ava followed her boyfriend, she told herself it was just curiosity. That was the lie, the truth was much uglier. For 3 months, Daniel had been different, not colder exactly. Worse, careful with his phone, careful with his schedule, careful with his eyes. People think cheating starts with distance. Most of the time it starts with precision, and Ava noticed all of it. The late-night work calls. The sudden gym membership. The new cologne he never used before. The way he smiled at texts without answering them in front of her. But the thing that finally broke her wasn't any of that. It was the charger. At 2 in the morning, she woke up and noticed his phone wasn't plugged in beside the bed anymore. It was in the bathroom. Locked, face down. Ava and Daniel had been together for 6 years. Long enough to stop asking certain questions. Long enough for routines to replace conversations. They had survived layoffs, family drama, debt, moving cities, and the kind of fights that leave people silent for days. From the outside they looked stable, but stable and happy are not the same thing. And slowly, invisibly, suspicion had started poisoning everything. Every delayed reply became evidence. Every shower became suspiciously timed. Every smile looked guilty. That is the thing about doubt. Once it enters a relationship, it does not sit quietly. It rearranges reality around itself. The first real crack happened on a Thursday night. Daniel came home almost 2 hours late. No message, no warning. When he walked in, Ava was sitting on the couch pretending to watch television. "You okay?" he asked. Simple question, normal tone, but guilt makes ordinary words sound dangerous. "Where were you?" "At work." "Until 11, there was a problem with a client." What client? And there it was, the shift. The moment a relationship stops sounding like love and starts sounding like interrogation. Daniel stared at her for a second too long, then he sighed. Not angry, tired, that hurt more. Over the next few weeks, Ava became someone she barely recognized. She checked his following list. She memorized unfamiliar female names. She replayed conversations in her head like surveillance footage. At night, while he slept beside her, she stared at the ceiling, imagining strangers touching the life she thought belonged to her. And the worst part, a small part of her wanted to find proof, because uncertainty is exhausting. A painful truth feels cleaner than endless suspicion. Then came the receipt, folded inside his jacket pocket. 2 coffees, 1 chocolate croissant, paid for at 8:14 a.m. on a Tuesday. Daniel hated chocolate. Ava stared at the receipt for almost a full minute. Her chest went cold. This was it. This was finally it. 3 days later, she followed him. She parked across the street from his office and waited. At 7:12 p.m., Daniel walked outside, but he didn't go home. He crossed the street and entered a small restaurant Ava had never seen before. And then he hugged another woman, not casually, not professionally, emotionally. Ava stopped breathing. The woman looked older. Mid-50s maybe, dark coat, short hair. Daniel sat across from her. They talked for almost an hour. At one point, the woman started crying. Daniel reached across the table and held her hands. Ava could not hear the conversation, so her imagination filled in the blanks, and imagination is almost always crueler than reality. That night she barely spoke. Daniel noticed, of course he noticed, "You seem distant." The irony almost made her laugh. Instead she asked, "Are you happy?" He looked confused. "What, with us?" Now he looked worried. "Ava, just answer." Daniel sat down slowly, and for the first time in months he looked genuinely afraid, not guilty, afraid. "I don't know what's happening lately," he said quietly, "but I feel like I'm losing you." That sentence shattered something inside her, because guilty people usually defend themselves. They do not sound heartbroken. The next morning, Ava did something she had promised herself she would never do. While Daniel showered, she unlocked his laptop. Her hands were shaking so badly she mistyped the password twice, and then she found it, an email thread, dozens of messages, some sent late at night, some emotional, some deeply personal. Ava felt sick until she read the names carefully. The emails were between Daniel and his biological mother, the woman at the restaurant, the woman who abandoned him when he was 6 years old. Ava sat frozen in silence. She knew almost nothing about Daniel's mother, only fragments that she left, that his father refused to talk about her, that Daniel never wanted to discuss it. And suddenly every suspicious moment over the past 3 months rearranged itself into something else entirely. The phone calls, the late nights, the emotional exhaustion, the distance. He had not been hiding an affair. He had been trying to reconnect with the person who destroyed his childhood, and he had been doing it alone. When Daniel walked out of the bathroom, he immediately knew something was wrong. Ava was crying before she even spoke. "I'm sorry," she whispered, and Daniel's face changed instantly. Not anger, recognition, like he had finally understood what had been happening between them all this time. "She came back," he said quietly. Ava nodded. "She wrote to me 4 months ago. Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I didn't know how." That answer hurt in a completely different way. Not betrayal, loneliness. Daniel sat beside her on the couch, and for the first time in years he told the full story, how his mother disappeared without explanation. How he spent birthdays waiting for phone calls that never came, how he convinced himself he did not care anymore until the email arrived. One message, one apology, one sentence capable of reopening every wound he thought had healed. "I didn't know if I hated her," he admitted, "or if I still wanted her to love me." Ava realized then that she had spent months preparing herself for betrayal, while Daniel had been privately surviving grief. And suddenly the relationship looked different from both sides. Ava had been afraid of abandonment. Daniel had been reliving it. Neither of them had known how to say that out loud. People think relationships collapse because of lies. Sometimes they collapse because 2 people are suffering silently in different rooms, and silence is dangerous, because silence forces imagination to finish the story. And imagination rarely chooses mercy. Over the next few weeks, things between them changed. Not instantly. Trust does not repair itself in a dramatic movie moment, it rebuilds slowly. Conversation by conversation, truth by truth, but for the first time in months they stopped trying to protect themselves from each other, and started letting each other in again. The strangest part, Daniel eventually stopped meeting his mother, not because he hated her, but because he realized closure and reconciliation are not always the same thing. Some people return to your life too late to become family again. And sometimes forgiveness simply means putting down the weight they gave you. Nothing more, nothing less. One last thing before we close. The most dangerous stories are usually the ones we tell ourselves in silence. A delayed text, a strange smile, a hidden phone. The human mind hates uncertainty so much that it would rather invent pain than wait for truth. And sometimes the person you think is betraying you is just fighting a battle they do not know how to explain. If this story stayed with you, subscribe to The Untold Score, because some stories are not about villains, they are about wounds, and the damage those wounds quietly create between people who still love each other.